Most businesses only focus on growing and expanding, and they give little to no attention to their exit strategies until after exit is staring them in the face. Learn here at Boosting Business Value, brought to you by Blue Sky Business Resources. You'll discover how to shape a more durable and saleable business, and how to implement a powerful, well-planned, and rewarding exit. Join Dr. David Gruder and Jason Tazinkowicz as they deliver actionable tips for lower middle market company owners, executives, and their trusted advisors. Find out where your business currently stands, how you can meet your revenue objectives more reliably, and how to grow your venture to the next level, all with a smooth and fruitful exit in mind. Here are your hosts, Dr. David and Jason.
Well, welcome back. This episode is the final part of our mini-series on the 3 inflection points that all businesses must master to achieve durability and long-term growth. And in this final episode in this mini-series, we're going to be diving into the 3rd inflection point, which is the bifurcation phase. And we'll go into all the details of that in a moment. But for those of you who are new to this Boosting Business Value podcast, I'm David Gruder, the business lifecycle exit planning and post-acquisition psychologist for Blue Sky Business Resources. And with me, as the always amazing, even if he's under the weather, always amazing, Troy Tazinkowicz, who's Blue Sky's Chief Operations Officer and all-around cat herder.
Thank you so much.
Great to be back with you.
Good to be back with you as well, my friend. So let's do a little bit of backing up before we start driving this bus forward, because this is going to be a meaty one, I think. So let's just go back to what are we talking about when we're talking about inflection points that are universal to businesses? And, when we think about inflection points, what we're really talking about are major functional pivot points. This is where strategy, organization, tactics, and leadership style requirements are forced to change in order for the organization to make the next big leap forward. And this is a perpetual cycle. Each of these inflection points in a durable, long-standing business are going to come up again and again and again. And you'll see in this episode that this bifurcation is really where we split inflection point 2 going into fruition kind of apart and let that start to run its life out as we move into the other inflection point of innovation for the new cycle to begin. And so these inflection points, just as another quick catch up, starts with innovation, we move into fruition, and then we go to this bifurcation or ambidextrous portion of the cycle when you're doing both at once. And eventually the product or service that you have in fruition will begin to twilight, and the innovation will replace with what's next.
Yes, really well said, because the heart of what happens during the bifurcation phase is that this is when you're really creating value and durability and hence salability. It's a really important phase because when companies rest on their laurels with their last innovation or their first innovation, they never get beyond a first innovation, they will become dinosaurs. It's not a matter of if that will happen. The only question is how long is it going to take for them to become dinosaurs? And there's just, unfortunately, a graveyard of companies that reached fruition with their initial or subsequent innovation and didn't go into bifurcation. They just stayed in the fruition phase and ended up going out of business or getting acquired in a hostile takeover. And that's exactly what a durable business takes very specific steps to prevent. And the bifurcation phase is when those steps are taken.
Well said. And I appreciate that. And, bifurcation is the hardest phase of running a business. We talked in the previous episodes, we talked about, an innovator has a difficulty and may not even have the right skill sets to lead an operation that's in fruition. And the great leaders and operators of fruition are typically not the best innovators. But now you need an executive team that can do both. And this is really tricky. And this is why so many organizations die when it's time to bifurcate, because it's so hard. And let's talk about some of the reasons why this is really challenging. Each portion of the attention in bifurcation requires a different management and operational style. You need in Fruition, as we talked about, this is all about consistency. It's all about continuity. It's all about a steady state of operation that churns out top quality, consistent products or services time and time again. Whereas the innovation phase is all about change. It's all about failing forward and making the smart decisions based on this change, adaptability, and failure. And so, these are as polar opposite as they can be in leadership style requirements and in organizational structure requirements. And so for the portion of the business that is in Fruition, it needs to stay focused on earning profits and putting out a consistently high quality product. And the portion of the business that is now going into innovation needs to have the freedom to not have the same constraints, the same KPIs, the same expectations of profitability and consistency that the going concern has. So on the surface, that sounds pretty easy. But the problem is, if you separate them too much, then the innovation team will be starved of all the resources that make this business successful. And so we want to make sure that as we're leading this bifurcation, we're separating them just enough that both operations have the ability to perform in the way that will drive towards success, but not so much that the resources and the strength and the value intrinsic to the organization are cut off from the innovating future of the company.
Beautifully said. And what you've, I think, captured perfectly is the nature of the ambidexterity that is central to the bifurcation phase, the ambidexterity that the C-suite or the top executive team in the business have to grow into having for this phase. Or if there are individuals for whom growing into that is beyond their capabilities or beyond their interest levels, no harm, no shame, no fault, no blame. It's just time to replace them. And that is something that is part of what's hard throughout all of these inflection points, because CEOs, founders, and other chief executives in an organization, their responsibility is to continually become who the business needs them to be in order for it to succeed in its current phase, or they need to get out of the way. Their time has come and gone. And I don't mean that, either do you, Jason, as a criticism. It's a matter of personal interest, personal capabilities, personal taste, personal passions. Some people are wired to continually become who the business needs them to be as the business evolves and grows and matures, and others are not. I mean, you and I know, for example, some people who their superpower is being a turnaround CEO. And I would never try to turn them into something that's more flexible or ambidextrous or who is growing as the business grows. That's their sweet spot. And they're brought in at the right point, hopefully. And once the turnaround is accomplished, they leave. They're an interim CEO for the purpose of turnaround. So it's important to me that we really underscore the importance of this not being a matter of being judgmental. It's a matter of right matching. Some people are in their sweet spot in a specific phase in an organization's development. And if that's you, let it be you. Just know that means that there's a time when your sweet spot comes on board as being optimally right matched for a business's current development phase. And there's going to be a time, because you succeed with your superpower, where you will be replaced by someone who is better suited for the next phase in the business's development. So if that's you, let it be you. If it's you to be in constant Kaizen as a leader, let that be you. It's all good. Just, be conscious, be aware, and be responsible for what's true for you.
Yeah. And a lot of this, when you're building the executive team with these inflection points in mind, you can start to think about the length of these phases within the cycle, right? I've seen businesses that have really fast cycles. They're constantly innovating. You think about products in the tech center, and typically you'll see an executive team with a CEO, COO partnership where one of them is the great fruition leader and the other one is the great innovation leader. And they just kind of pass the baton between each other, and so don't expect one person to be equally exceptional at innovation and at fruition. We all have our strengths and weaknesses, but we can build a team where we can feed one another.
Well said. It's the team that needs to be ambidextrous, not necessarily every single member of the team.
Yeah.
So let's go into detail about the innovation adjustments during bifurcation. And you've already covered some of this. The autonomy and freedom and entrepreneurship that the innovation group in the bifurcation phase needs to have basically requires freedom from the KPIs that are used by the fruition folks and the metrics and the salary criteria and all of those, because they're back in the innovation phase, whatever is next for that business's development. So that's really important to be aware of and to implement. And it's also not identical to the first phase, the first inflection point, the innovation phase, in that in the bifurcation phase, innovation requires being more discerning about what you do and don't develop as the next innovation. Because if you develop an innovation that requires you to, for example, shift your whole focus on the customers or clients that you serve, that's going to be a really uphill struggle. Whereas if your next innovation is an innovation that the market you already serves is looking for next, that's more efficient generally. So that kind of leads into appreciating that innovation during the bifurcation phase can't be divorced from the bigger company, from the overall company's functioning. Or if it is divorced, if they go off completely siloed, fully siloed on their own, then what inevitably will emerge is resentment and poor buy-in and internal sabotage and fiscal challenges that should and could have been avoided if this version of innovation was handled right. And what that ends up leading to is internal losers inside the business. So this is all by way of saying that this is another aspect of why innovation during the bifurcation phase is not identical to innovation during phase one, inflection point, during the first phase, the innovation phase. And because of being ambidextrous, because you're doing both fruition and innovation of the next thing during the bifurcation phase, the matrix communication, your communication framework, can really be challenging because now it's more complicated. You're doing two focuses at once. And that really also makes human resource management more complicated. And of course, in the context of this episode, we're not going to go into all of the ins and outs of how human resource management becomes more complicated. It's just crucial to be aware of that and then make sure that your HR people are really literate in how to manage human resources during a bifurcation phase, because if your HR folks are not literate in that, they may need to be replaced, possibly. Or they need to be up-leveled in their skill sets to deal with human resource management challenges that are specific to the bifurcation phase.
So true. And, I want to build on that in a couple of ways, because it occurs to me there are going to be a lot of business teams that are sitting, listening to our podcast and being like, we've got an R&D department. They do great. Why are you wasting all this time on R&D and calling it bifurcation? We know what we're doing. And I'd like to caution you, Kodak had an exquisite R&D department. As a matter of fact, Kodak developed the first digital camera in their R&D department, but they were no longer a bifurcation capable organization.
Right.
And so they weren't able to bring their innovation that ultimately changed the world of photography to life in a meaningful way. And we all know what happened to them because of that. This bifurcation into agility is taking what R&D comes up with and building a business case around it and bringing that business case to life to the point where it can be turned into fruition, turned into profit. And so it's really important to keep in mind that these are different things, totally different beasts. But the other thing that in what you were saying, Doctor, about the human resource element of being bifurcated, you're so right. When you're starting a startup, you have to build all the bones of a business, right? In order to bring your product or service to life. When you're bifurcating inside an organization, a lot of those bones would be redundant, right? The payroll department, the cost accounting department, there are all these different divisions, even production lines. If you're creating products, you don't want to build a manufacturing line until you know that your product is viable and that your business case is viable. And so there's this requisite sharing where the innovators have to pull resources, whether that's human resources or whether that's production time or service time from the Fruition organization. And, this is where the Fruition side has to make adjustments too. Because again, this is the camp in the business that loves consistency. They love the status quo. They are really happy doing the exact same thing every day. And now we're asking them to change just a little bit. And that part is hard because you've got normal employees who are now have two masters. But one of their masters has a known, proven, and well understood compensation package that pertains to your ability to pay attention to that master. Your performance metrics, your output, your quality metrics, whatever it is. And this other new, different master is asking you to sacrifice your bonus to support them for what? To interrupt my status quo? And so you have to create, on the Fruition side of the company, you have to create new incentives and new structures to make it appropriate for these people to change their operations and to sacrifice one KPI in order to benefit another one without sacrificing their quality of work and without sacrificing the consistency of their income. And so that's something that is really tricky on the Fruition side. The other thing is the Fruition side is paying for innovation, right? Innovation by definition is not generating revenue. And so when you've got a really successful Fruition side, it's possible for the innovation team to feel like they have a blank check and to fall in love with an idea that might not be quite viable. And so balancing this relinquishment of the KPI control and the profitability metrics that we're used to now in Fruition, but also putting in guardrails so that we still act like innovators, we still act like a startup, we still act like we want to get profitability in a reasonable time frame is really important. And again, all of that comes back to what you were talking about before, which is being able to communicate across boundaries and beyond silos directly to key people to make these decisions and to manage these things appropriately.
Really beautifully said. And I'm going to piggyback on one of your marvelous points about this kind of struggle and, unfortunately, too often conflicts between two archetypal energies in organizational functioning that are both equally important and very, very different. They actually counterbalance each other. And these are 2 out of 5 core archetypal energies that a C-suite needs to be mindful of, that is covered in the Nimble C-Suite book that Mark Smith and I co-authored. And those 2 counterbalancing energies I'm referring to right now are the magician and the steward. And what those energies are about, the magician is about transformation. It's about change. It's the innovation energy in an organization. And the steward is about stability, predictability, organization standards in an organization. And what happens, an organization where there's too much steward and not enough innovation, is that the company becomes undurable because status quo addiction is running the show, and the next innovation, the next phase in bifurcation never happens. So the company becomes a dinosaur. And the other way around is that if the innovation folks, if the magicians are over energized and too full of themselves and downplay or criticize the stewards, then what you end up with is too much transformation, not enough stability, and that leads to chaos, which also destroys an organization. This is not a choice of one over the other. It's the choice that says both and we're going to find ways to stay coordinated with each other, even though we're siloed to an extent, because the innovation folks and the fruition folks in the bifurcation phase are supposed to have different focuses and different KPIs. So there's a certain amount of siloing, but the siloing can't go too far, or you get the Kodak moment.
I've never heard the Kodak moment used in that way, and that's just perfect.
Neither have I. I just made it up.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's so true. You know, this is the tension that makes a real business durable and thriving, right? If you can manage this piece of tension, then there are really very few external threats that can get the better of you.
Yes.
And so, you know, this is really key. And it's important to recognize that this is hard. It's okay for you as a operational leader to be challenged in this. And it's okay for the team to experience a certain amount of turmoil as you're going through this. But if you're aware of the challenges and you're communicating effectively, you will all grow stronger as an organizational team together by getting through that challenge. And that's the work that makes businesses really exciting to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple key notes on the challenges. And we covered most of these, but the one key note on the challenges that I want to point out and put a really fine point on, because we haven't, I don't think, stressed it enough. Successful bifurcation does not work without the full support of the C-suite.
Right.
We can't have any member of an executive team allowing the ask mommy or ask daddy mentality to proliferate within either side of bifurcation. There has to be clear and wholehearted, whole-throated support consistently. The other thing that is really important is this only works if you're bifurcating against inspiring company vision. There has to be a meaningful why behind where we're going, or all of this work isn't worth it. And so, you know, those are the two biggest challenges that I think are underappreciated in this. The unquestioning support doesn't mean you don't challenge bad decisions. That just means we are going to work through this and figure this out. And we are going to do that by having open communication, by supporting good decisions, challenging questionable decisions so that we can make them great and moving forward together.
Beautifully said. Ready to move on to the key takeaways?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So we have two key takeaways, not just from this episode, but from this mini series on the 3 inflection points. And the first of those takeaways is that this inflection point cycle, where you go from innovation to fruition to bifurcation, and then you keep repeating, right? The bifurcation ad infinitum, meaning over and over again, if you're committed to your business remaining durable and establishing itself as a thought and market leader in your industry and remaining a thought and market leader in your industry over time, so that you build your business value and you build its saleability if exit is part of your plan, which some form of exit is going to be part of the plan anyway. So the inflection point cycle can and must be repeated over and over and over again if you're dedicated to durability and boosting business value, which is why the name of our podcast is the name of our podcast. This is the heart of boosting business value right here.
Absolutely. I love that. And, my key takeaway kind of piggybacks on this. It's the mastery of this cycle. It's the mastery of this cycle that separates durable, lifelong businesses that can transfer ownership, that can change key personnel, but will always be leading the charge versus everybody that's trying to keep up. The scariest statistic I've heard in a long time, and I hear a lot of bad statistics, but the average life cycle of a business in today's economy is 40 years. That's less time than I've been on this earth. It's not quite, but it's getting close to less time than I've been working. Because business owners and entrepreneurs are not mastering this cycle. And so, not only is mastery of this cycle key to durability, but like you said, Dr. Gruder, it's key to boosting business value, but it's also key to having an exit-ready operation, a business that can withstand a change of control at the top level because they already know how to adapt.
Mm-hmm. And this is why we have devoted this series of episodes to really unpacking the inflection point cycle, because you and I, Jason, are of the belief and of the experience that far fewer businesses attend to this than ought to be attending to it. And it's time for this understanding about the inflection point cycle to become an industry or a business worldwide clarity about this, because it's just that important.
Yes. We want to see 100-year-old businesses again.
And I particularly have a bias about that because, as you know, one of my areas of training is master planning, and master planning is building 50 to 100-year plans, and sometimes even longer than that. If the average business is dead in 40 years, they've not done master planning, I can promise you.
Yeah, that would be a weird master plan indeed. Our 50-year plan, we've been dead for 10 years. Right. On that super joyful note, thank you so much for being with us in this series, for supporting boosting business value. On behalf of Dr. Gruder and myself, it means a lot to us to see your comments, to know you're listening, to get feedback. We try to incorporate that feedback in a timely manner to make this podcast continually getting better. But please click the subscribe button if you like what you heard. That way right away when we put a new episode out. We try to be consistent at every 2 weeks. Sometimes life gets in the way. So make sure that you're notified. And we'd also look forward to having you stop by the Blue Sky Business website at blueskyadvisors.net. You can find the podcast, the videos, the audios, and the transcripts at blueskyadvisors.net/podcast. And you can also get some really valuable free tools on our website. There's a click to get started button right at the upper right-hand corner when you pop in. But we've got a series of, 5 to 10 question micro surveys that will give you deep insights into your operational infrastructure and your strategic planning success capability. They're quick, easy to take. They'll give you actionable responses right then and there. So please take advantage of it. And we look forward to talking to you next time on Boosting Business Value.
That's all for this episode of Boosting Business Value. May your new learning result in the smoothest and most profitable exit strategy for your business. With the right knowledge and guidance, the sky's the limit to what you can do. Do not miss an episode by subscribing to the show. And if you want to learn where your business currently stands, we also have free key opportunity assessments. Find all of them at blueskyadvisors.net/podcast. Thank you for joining us. See you on the next one.